Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent figure of franchise and other filmmaking and ask a simple question: are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I am joined, as always, by my co-host. He is the Dr. Lazarus. It's my Jason Nesmith. Mr. Jason Gong.
Hello.
Do you want to be like the tech guy, or is there like another one?
That one's fine.
The crew members you want it to be?
Which one's Lazarus?
That's Alan Rickman.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he is like the sidekick. As alluded to in that intro there, we are talking today about the 1999 film Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is one of my favorite films of the 90s. It is, of course, part of that illustrious year of 1999, which means it is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year.
Happy birthday, Galaxy Quest.
Happy birthday, Galaxy Quest. Happy birthday, America. We're shooting this on 4th of July.
Happy birthday, America. This is how we celebrate our country's independence, by making a podcast.
Yeah, if you hear any loud noises in the background, it may or may not be fireworks.
Yeah.
Definitely not gunshots.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Get a little wild on the pod here. But yeah, Galaxy Quest is an incredible idea for a film. The concept on paper is really clever. The film is a Star Trek parody, but it's not like a one-to-one parody. It's a group of actors in the movie. They play actors who used to be on Star Trek, essentially, and now they're doing like convention scene hits because none of them get like acting jobs anymore. And Jason Nesmith, who is played by Tim Allen, he's basically the Captain Kirk of the team. He is approached by a group of actual aliens to go help them with this alien problem they're having, because they watched all of their Star Trek, which is called Galaxy Quest in the movie. Mm-hmm. They watched all the Galaxy Quest episodes, and they call them the historical documents. So they think that the show actually happened, and these people are the experts, so they're calling in the experts. The movie is hilarious because for the vast majority of the movie, the crew is terrified.
Yeah.
Because they're just actors. They're not actually these people, and they're in way over their heads. And especially, I would say, halfway through the film, when it starts to establish the actual stakes of the alien villains, that they're, trying to murder them. They're like, we're out. Please, we don't want to die. We're just actors. This movie's hilarious. I think it holds up incredibly well. I think that's part of the reason why we're talking about it today. This movie has only aged better and better as, other fandoms have been built out. Star Trek is kind of the first true fandom to this scale that ever existed. And I don't know, I feel like they could do movies for all sorts of fandoms in this same vein. I don't know. What did you think of Galaxy Quest?
It was good. Yeah, I'd only seen this all the way through once before, but I had seen clips of it or moments of it on TV plenty of times. It's very funny. It's very clever. Like you said, I think what kind of makes it special is that the type of meta humor that they're using is still very finger on the pulse today. The way they talk about fandom, the way they display conventions, and the way that people act around actors that they admire, it's all still relevant. And I think that's kind of what makes this hold up. I think sometimes when we talk about movies this old, we complain about the CGI, or we find faults in some of the things that make it feel like it's a product of its time. But this could have come out yesterday, and it would still be a very well-received movie, I think.
Yeah, the two main sources of comedy in the film are the relationships between the fans and the actors. And I should say, when it comes to celebrities that go to these Comic-Cons all the time, they tend to be mostly in the category of washed-up actors. Mm-hmm. They were in one or two things that are nerdy, and they've had difficulty getting cast in anything else big. So it's a way to make an income. You go to different conventions, and you take pictures with fans, and you sign autographs, and it's a decent way to make money. And for some of those former actors or struggling actors, they seem to take it in stride. They're happy with it. They're fans of the series too. But there's the flip side of that, which is mainly what we see in this movie, which are the celebrities that they fucking hate that this is what their life has become.
Yeah, and this is what they have to do.
And they're so over it to such a level. And specifically, Dr. Lazarus, who is played by Alan Rickman, he's basically Spock. Mm-hmm. And he's clearly meant to be portraying a classically trained actor who was in a science fiction show. Mm-hmm. And he's older, and he's not able to get parts. And he's stuck being this Spock character all the time, and he absolutely hates it.
Yeah.
And because he's like the intelligent one of the crew in the show, he's always like, he's attracting like the nerdiest people coming up to him at the conventions. And they all want him to say, by Grabthar's hammer.
It's very
Which
silly.
is like his live long and prosper, I guess.
Yeah, so that one is like very true to life because Leonard Nimoy also had a stint where he was like so sick of being the Spock actor and having people come up to him just for that. I think he wrote a book called I Am Not Spock. That's one of his autobiographies. In his later years, he came back around to loving the character and respecting, the fact that fandom had supported him for this role for so many years, to the extent that he was in the J.J. Abrams movies. Yeah. So he got over it. But there was a period of time where I think, they were very much basing the Alan Rickman character on Leonard Nimoy's writings about how it felt to play Spock.
Yeah, or like Alec Guinness in Star Wars, where he absolutely hated that basically became his legacy as an actor was he was Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he fucking hated Star Wars.
I still think that one's funny. I mean, he kept coming back to play Ghost Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I'm sure the paycheck was good.
I'm sure it was.
That'll bring anybody back.
Yeah.
Just going through the cast here, it's a really fun cast. Obviously, Tim Allen plays the Captain Kirk character, which I think he pulls off like a William Shatner parody character very well.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't resort to doing a impression of the guy, but I think Tim Allen and William Shatner are both kind of known to be sort of grandiose and not nice guys. So
yeah, and they think they're hot shit.
Yeah, so probably easy shoes for him to fill.
And then Sigourney Weaver plays the female lead, which is really interesting to see her in this type of role because obviously she's mainly known for the Alien films, and Ripley as a character is an action hero.
Yeah,
she's one of the most badass women in the history of film, and in this movie she's scared to death the entire time. And she's a damsel in distress. And at the end of the movie, her suit is getting ripped apart.
Yeah.
And her boobs are just out for the entire climax, which is probably intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she had a lot of fun with this role. All these actors were in their 40s when they did this movie. So it kind of reflects the real life actors being a little bit past their prime as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we had Alan Rickman. The tech engineer character is played by Tony Shalhoub.
Yeah, I see that the tech character's name is Fred Kwan. I bet they planned on casting an Asian person, but then they were Tony Shalhoub is too good.
Who would have been the older Asian actor they could have cast there?
That's probably why Tony Shalhoub got the part, because Jackie Chan was too expensive and there was no other ones.
Yeah, Bruce Lee was dead. They're oh, we ran out of guys. One of the more interesting characters is an actor that played a red shirt in one episode who is always showing up to the conventions and emceeing things for them. He's played by Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell's a huge actor now, 25 years later. It's possible that he's the most prolific actor of anybody in this cast in hindsight. And he's really funny. And he's one that specifically because he played a red shirt, for anybody that doesn't know what a red shirt is in Star Trek, the trope is that, the minor people that work on the ship, they all wear red shirts to designate what level they work on. And they tend to be the ones that are cannon fodder. They get killed off in episodes because they're just bit characters. Mm-hmm. He is convinced that he's going to die for a lot of this movie.
I kind of thought he was going to die too. He doesn't, spoilers. And then, he, reading off this cast list, it's great because you have a bunch of, I would consider A-listers or former A-listers, and they all do kind of have full arcs for each of these characters.
Yeah, I mean, even some of the, minor characters, I mean, Justin Long plays, this nerdy kid that has to help them out at the end of the movie. Awesome climax of the film, by the way, where it involves Tim Allen having to communicate back and forth with mega nerds of the show because the alien race believed that this show was historical documents. The ship that they built is a 1-to-1 of the ship in the show. So even down to the mechanical components. So they go into this mechanical area, and it's just this like absurd like series of crushers, like some sort of like obstacle course game show. And it makes sense because they built it exactly like how it is in the show. But Justin Long and his friends, they're like experts at all of this stuff to help them navigate it. It's cool.
Right.
And then the aliens, there's some interesting like comedy actors that are in the aliens as well. Missy Pyle plays the female alien that falls in love with Tony Shalhoub. And then Rainn Wilson is also one of the aliens who I don't think he has a single line in this movie. He's just there.
Yeah.
You might not even have noticed him if I didn't point that out. That was Rainn
I wouldn't
Wilson.
have noticed him now.
I mean, this is what, like 6 years before The Office?
I think so.
So this is like pre-big break Rainn Wilson. Like he was probably just getting whatever jobs he could back then.
Definitely.
Were you a big Star Trek fan?
Not really. I watched Star Trek Voyager as it was airing. Both of my parents liked Star Trek a lot. I forget which one they liked, the original or Next Generation. I think they grew up on the original and were kind of into Next Gen. They went to a couple of the Star Wars conventions. I know we have a poster signed by some Klingons somewhere in our house. So they definitely liked Star Trek and experienced, like, you know, that side of fandom early on. I think they only went to 1 or 2, so it's not like it consumed their life like it does for some of the characters in this movie. But yeah, I guess I like Star Trek. I really only watched Voyager.
Yeah, I feel like we're like a generation too late to really get into Star Trek.
Yeah, Star Trek kind of skipped our generation because Voyager was on, and then Enterprise, which wasn't even that Star Trek-y. And then there was no Star Trek for like many years. And then there was the Abrams movies.
Well, Next Generation came out, what, in the 90s?
Like the 80s.
Was it? It was that long ago? I watched some of Next Generation. Because I remember like when I was in college, I was like, I'm a nerd. Like I got to watch Star Trek at some point.
Right.
And then I started watching it. And it's interesting how, yeah, some of the episodes are like pretty hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like the episodes don't really, like episode to episode, there's not a lot of like through lines, which I'm assuming was intentional.
Yeah, it's very episodic.
And especially like some of those like earlier Star Treks, like they're still like pretty low budget. I mean, especially like the 60s Star Trek is like insanely low budget.
Right.
To the point where it's comedic almost, the sets. So I know that there are like nerds older than us, like in their like 40s and 50s that they absolutely love Star Trek. My best friends, Red Letter Media, they absolutely fucking love Star Trek. The main guy, Mike, he loves Star Trek so much he can recognize plot points from random Star Trek episodes and like point them out as being like the inspiration to like a Marvel movie or something like that he's watching. He'll be able to go, oh, this is just like this one thing in this one Star Trek episode. And he'll be like dead on correct with the plot point. It's absolutely wild. Down to like what the episode is called. What I'm saying is the fans that are depicted in this movie, maybe not going far enough for like how much, you know, how deep they go into it. The first time we see Justin Long and his friends, they go up to Tim Allen and they're asking him like a niche question about like a mechanical system in an episode and how there's like inconsistencies or something like that. And he has to be like, listen, kid, it's a fucking TV show. What, are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I do like the way the fans are portrayed. And then the fact that they get to be sort of like the heroes at the end. It's definitely like a celebration of that culture, even though they are used for a lot of the humor. So this movie is able to kind of balance, you know, making fun of Star Trek and its fandoms with celebrating it at the same time, which I think is tricky.
Yeah, which I think is the, you know, that's the best parody films do that, where they don't punch down on the source material that it's parodying. This film definitely has a level of reverence for Star Trek as well as the fandom of Star Trek. And I was reading that the Star Trek actors specifically really liked Galaxy Quest. They thought that it was like a really fun, like, you know, bringing it all back around type moment for them, seeing it on screen.
Yeah, I read that a couple of them were wary about seeing it because they had just thought that it was going to be making fun of Star Trek and they didn't want to sit through that for 2 hours. But they all, like, every single testimonial from a Star Trek actor is like, I love Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, on their Wikipedia page, it says that Star Trek fans voted Galaxy Quest as the 7th best Star Trek film of all time in 2013.
Yeah.
So Star Trek fans really like this movie, too.
Yeah, they do.
I guess we can talk about like the box office stuff a little bit here. The movie came out on Christmas Day in 1999, which is interesting. This is not a Christmas movie by any means. It just came out in December.
Sure.
You got to assume that they thought this was going to make some money with that release date. It had a $45 million budget. It made $90 million. So
It's good. Made its money back.
It probably made its money back or like a small profit.
Yeah.
By no means like a massive success. This is 1999, so I don't know what else came out around that time. I don't know if Phantom Menace was in December or if it was in May. But it's a little unfortunate because of that. This movie sets up for a sequel really well, and we never got a sequel to it.
Yeah, I mean, they've talked about doing it every few years since it came out. I think there's a series in development somewhere now, but who knows if that'll ever actually happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately for now, a sequel really doesn't make much sense, mainly because the central like conflict between the characters, the biggest one is between Tim Allen and Alan Rickman. And Alan Rickman died 8 years ago, right. So that ship has kind of sailed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they could still, there's still a lot of other characters they could kind of build stories around. But I also think there's a film that doesn't necessarily need a sequel. And I think that a sequel would be really easy to mess up. So,
well, do you think that they could do this like same concept with like some other fandom and make it work in a similar way? Like if they did like something like Star Wars, or they did like superheroes, or...
Yeah, so I don't think Star Wars is like far enough removed. I know that Star Wars and Star Trek are very different, but the idea of like a Mark Hamill getting taken by aliens to be a Jedi, I don't think is different enough. Maybe like a Lord of the Rings type thing where you find out magic is real and they take the actors from whatever the equivalent of Lord of the Rings is. But I think there are other movies that do like similar stuff.
What would be perfect for this would be a Power Rangers parody.
That would be good. Because
Power Rangers is a franchise that every Power Rangers actor, as soon as they're done doing Power Rangers, they go right on the convention circuit. They know where their bread is buttered.
Yeah.
They're going to be signing Power Rangers autographs for the rest of their life.
It's not a bad way to make a living. I did feel like sometimes while I was watching it, I was getting kind of bored of just the plot. Like, I didn't feel that threatened by the alien, I guess, and I didn't really care what his evil plan was.
Now, the alien is very, like, small-scale stakes, which is, I think, kind of funny. It's very Star Trek, like, where it's just a single ship that the guy has. Mm-hmm. He's an alien, and that's it.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, is it the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek film where it's Eric Bana's alien character?
The bad guy, yeah, and he just wants revenge or something.
But I think even him, he has like a fleet of ships, not just one ship.
Yeah. The bad guy, I will say, in Galaxy Quest, he looked super cool.
Yeah,
like,
really good.
The character design was great. But I never felt like the crew was in any real danger. I didn't fully understand or care about the bad guy's plot or like the aliens that we were rooting for, like what their deal was. All the good stuff in this for me is just like the meta humor, the way they talk about fandom. But when it comes to the actual plot of the movie itself, I think that's where its weak point is.
Yeah, I think it moves pretty well, at least. Like they get the entire crew on the alien ship fairly quickly. And then there's a great comedy sequence of the kid that's the pilot, who he was a little kid in the Star Trek, in the Galaxy Quest show, and he obviously has no idea how to fly a spaceship, so he like scrapes the shit out of the ship when they're pulling out of the docking bay, which is great. But yeah, then they like sustain damage by going through an asteroid field. I'm sorry, it's a minefield. It's a minefield in space that they're flying through, and they sustain like a shitload of damage, and so they have to go onto a planet to get a doodad to fix up their ship.
Right.
And so they basically have this very Star Trekian like little excursion to an alien planet where they run into a bunch of like weird little alien creatures, and then Tim Allen has to fight a giant rock monster. And what's cool is that there's a pretty decent amount of like foreshadowing and like callbacks when it comes to like how they fight the alien guy at the end of the movie. That same kid who didn't know how to pilot for shit at the beginning of the movie, he navigates that same minefield at the end of it like perfectly, to the point where he's like dragging the mines behind him and uses them to like like whip them into the to the enemy alien, which is cool.
Yeah, that was a cool sequence.
And then like Tony Shalhoub, who like he's using this device that teleports you from the planet, and he had like no idea how to use it early in the film, and then by the end of the film he uses it to physically teleport the rock monster into a room with a bunch of the enemy aliens so it could take them out.
Yep.
So it's cool like seeing the character development for all of them. Alan Rickman's character, there is one scientist alien that is really obsessed with the Dr. Lazarus character, and Alan Rickman, who is the most like cynical of like any of these actors, like he could not be fucking bothered a little bit. Mm-hmm. He like comes back around by the end of it, and then like that alien guy gets killed, and he says, "Dr. Lazarus, I've always thought of you as like a father to me." It's great. So the movie's able to put in like some serious moments with all the comedy. And, I think it's a movie that knows what it is. I think they hit the tone perfectly. I'm really surprised they didn't make more of these. I understand like it didn't make a ton of money, but...
Yeah, I guess when you have a cast that's that stacked, they can ask for much bigger paychecks the second go around. And I guess there wasn't anything indicating that a sequel would do better at the box office.
Yeah, it might have been tough. And also, this feels like one of those situations where you have to get the whole cast back. Mm-hmm. That's an issue that the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies had, where they were having trouble getting the full cast back. I mean, I think that's why like they haven't made one since what was the last one that came out?
Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah, which is a fun movie. Like, okay.
Yeah, I only saw the first one of those.
But yeah, if you have a movie or like a franchise that's built around this like crew, you got to get the crew back every movie, or at least most of the crew.
Yeah, and most of those crew members are probably out becoming more and more famous off the back of this project. So
yeah. Though I do think if they ever wanted to do like a soft reboot, I feel like this is a movie that would have a target on it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because like we were saying at the top there, it is very like prescient with like current fandom and current fan culture.
Yeah, I'm sure they could soft reboot this with like an entirely new cast, because Star Trek had many sequel series, and they could do more direct parodies of like The Next Generation or something. Yeah, they could bring in like younger up and coming actors if they wanted to. But I think I read that like almost every actor who worked on this is pretty game to like do a sequel.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't know if they want Tim Allen back. Tim Allen's like a bit of he's more of a controversial character than he was back in the 90s.
I think if Pixar keeps taking him back, then these guys are going to have no problem doing that either.
Yeah. But anyway, we can go into our objective rating here for Galaxy Quest. Interestingly enough, it has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got pretty good critic reviews. We are going to reference our good pal Letterboxd. Letterboxd, if you're listening, please sponsor the podcast. Appreciate it. Galaxy Quest has a 3.7 average rating on Letterboxd.
Really high for Letterboxd.
With most of the reviews coming in at like, most people giving it like 3.5 to 4 stars. So yeah, pretty good. I think I gave it 4.5. What, you gave it a 4, right?
Yep. One of the few movies that you rank higher than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that I personally have difficulty punching holes in, because oftentimes I'm looking at what was the intention behind the filmmaking, and I think this movie hits everything that it's going for.
Sure.
So even if there's like certain elements that might be like boring or something like that, or if like the pacing's a little bit off, I think it's still exactly what they're going for, which I can appreciate a lot. Also, the movie's like really funny, which is not something to just like scoff at.
Yeah.
There's so many quote unquote like parody comedies out there that are just fucking garbage.
Yeah. There's plenty of just like regular comedies that aren't very funny. So it's definitely refreshing.
Like this movie consistently is like clever to the point where you're still like laughing at it.
And it makes you laugh out loud, which is becoming rarer, I feel like.
Yeah. The entire like through line. Anytime they think they're in danger and they're going to die is really funny. Like when Sam Rockwell's asking them what is his character's last name. He's like, I don't have a last name because I die.
Yeah.
3.7 is going to be our rating here, our objective rating. Jason, you have the job of arguing that Galaxy Quest is overrated. What is the argument for that?
Sure. So, like I said before, I have some issues with the plotting and kind of the stakes of the movie. I won't repeat that, but I would say that a lot of the humor relies on kind of having ties to like fandom culture. You're probably not going to care that much about this movie if you're a normie and you have never been to like a comic convention or a Star Trek convention. If you're someone who just likes, maybe you like classic movies or something, maybe you only like sports. If you've avoided comic book culture and everything that surrounds it and nerdy culture, then this movie's just not going to do a lot for you. So that's one thing. Like, this is a very good movie for a very specific audience. Now, granted, that audience has grown a lot over the last 20 years. There's a lot more people who identify as nerds and like nerdy
that audience is the majority of the current like movie-going audience right now.
Yeah, it's probably most of our listeners too. So if you're listening to this podcast, you'll probably like this movie. But still, I think that a lot of the humor is very specific. There's also some humor that's just a little slapstick and like physical, and that should work for everyone. But a lot of the comedy is really tied to just fandom culture. And also today there's a lot more movies doing like meta humor, movies and TV shows that really rely on that type of comedy. So meta humor is like when the show or movie is almost making fun of itself and knows about the fact that it's a movie or a show. So like Deadpool has done that. Community did that a lot. Like, it's something that audiences are much more used to now. So I think back in 99, this would be like really cutting edge. But currently it's stuff that we've all seen before. And frankly, like the way we talk about with Deadpool, unless it's done really well, we're getting kind of sick of it. So I think there's an argument that this is overrated, just like with how specific the humor is. If you kind of strip away that specific humor, then you're just left with a plot that isn't particularly strong. And I think that this movie is like really revered by nerds. And, you know, if you do strip away those elements, then maybe it doesn't hold up.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that argument for sure. I would agree that if you're somebody that doesn't particularly like genre films like this, then I think like a parody of this kind of stuff isn't gonna like do much for you anyway. I would say that would be like, that's my main argument for underrated. I could go on and on about how this is like a clever idea that's executed really well. We talked about that already. But specifically, when you compare it to other parody films, because that's what this is a parody comedy of essentially a beloved science fiction television franchise. And when you put it like toe to toe against like the other like best parody films of all time, they're rarely like nerd stuff like this. Mm-hmm. You know, whenever we see parodies of things like Star Wars or Harry Potter or like Lord of the Rings, like it's usually like they go the really, really silly route with it. They don't really take it seriously whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And it's something I really appreciate with Galaxy Quest is that they take it seriously like 15%.
Yeah.
They go like a little heartwarming with it in certain spots. And I think it gives the movie like a level of character that, like, if you just went full blown comedy with it, I think doesn't work to the same extent. Comparing this to Spaceballs, like, you think this is better or worse than Spaceballs?
I don't know, I haven't seen Spaceballs in like 20 years.
Because like Spaceballs is literally just a direct parody of Star Wars. Like, it's just Mel Brooks like fucking around the entire movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some gags in Spaceballs that are really memorable, but I don't really remember the movie.
Yeah, like Spaceballs is kind of like it's like a series of like SNL sketches at times.
Basically. Yeah.
With Star Wars as the backdrop. Like Galaxy Quest is like an actual movie with a plot, and it's got a beginning, middle, and end to it. And the end of the movie is really satisfying when they're crashing the ship and the ship crashes into the convention.
Yeah.
And they get out of the ship one by one with their introductions, and all the crowd is cheering them on. And then the alien villain pops out of the ship as like a like one last like attempt to like take him out. And Tim Allen just like vaporizes him in front of all the fans, and the fans start cheering. Yeah. It's great. It's an awesome idea for an ending. Yeah, I just think it's a film that's like insanely well crafted, especially when you put it like toe to toe to other parodies. There are some other like really good parodies, but they tend to be in like other genres. Something like Top Secret, which is like a film that I like a lot, which is about like espionage movies, or like Naked Gun, which is like a parody of detective films, or Austin Powers, which we'll probably do Austin Powers on this show at some point, because I love the Austin Powers. We'll get Becca on. Becca loves the Austin Powers movies.
Sure.
And Austin Powers is a parody of James Bond, but like Austin Powers, those movies just stand on their own as well.
They do. Yeah.
You can watch Austin Powers and be like, these films are hilarious and they actually have a plot to them, but they're also James Bond ripoffs. And that's kind of like what Galaxy Quest is to Star Trek. In Star Trek, you know, nerd fans will get so heated about like the smallest thing, especially if they think that you're like punching down or making fun of them. And that's not what this movie does at all. I'm really shocked that it didn't make more money. I'm sure that if we looked at like the box office release and to see like what other movies were in theaters around that time, it's possible that like this movie's biggest mistake was that it came out in 1999. You know, I don't know if it was going toe to toe with like The Matrix or Phantom Menace was out.
The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland.
Oh, see, there you go.
American Beauty,
Which was the best picture winner, I believe.
Fight Club did not make money. This movie beat Fight Club.
Imagine going to the theater and you're like, I could watch Galaxy Quest or Fight Club tonight. We were looking at the box office today for like what to see in theaters. They're like, Inside Out 2 or Despicable Me 4.
Being John Malkovich, I'm not really seeing what beat this movie.
That's interesting because Christmas is, the big time to see movies. Was not going to movies nearly as much in 1999 due to being 7 years old. So it's possible that like the summer movie season was just like a bigger thing back then.
Oh, wait, I was looking at the wrong month.
I was going to say the films that you were listing sounded like Oscar movies.
Stuart Little.
Love Stuart Little.
I know. Maybe I saw that instead of Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, you were part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, Stuart Little is maybe just as good. I should rewatch it. The Talented Mr. Ripley. And then not a lot of other ones. I'm really not seeing what big contender there was. Bicentennial Man, which has left much less of a mark on the culture, but possibly did better at the box office.
Yeah.
Oh, The Green Mile.
Love The Green Mile.
Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo.
Oh, no.
Yep, interesting ones on here, but there's no Star Wars, there's no The Matrix. It was just up against other movies. But, you know, sometimes other movies do better, but no one remembers them, so...
Would you call Galaxy Quest a cult classic?
Yeah, I would say
or
so.
like a cult film in that regard?
I guess. It's a little too successful to really be a cult film, but I would consider it that.
Yeah, if you go online and you look up like lists of like the best like cult movies, it's a pretty like high bar like that they set.
Yeah, then it's definitely...
It's like anything that didn't make like $100 million is a cult movie.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, we can do final verdict here, Jason. I mean, do you think this movie overall is overrated or underrated?
I think it's pretty properly rated. I know we try to avoid that take.
Was it 3.7? I mean, I think like in context, I think it's a little bit underrated.
Yeah.
I think this is like on the higher end of this type of movie.
I agree with that, yeah.
So because of that, I have to give it its props. It's also a movie. We're talking about rewatchability today when it comes to movies. I think this film has like a ton of rewatchability because it's not super long and it is like actually funny.
Yep. Yeah,
so like you can just pop it in and be like, this is fun.
Yeah.
You can like put it on the background.
It was like our wind down to our Friday night game night last week. It was perfect.
Yeah, it was good. Mm-hmm. It's always nice like getting comfort films like that. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Happy birthday, America. Go have a brat for us, a hot dog, some burgers. We've been making a lot of burgers in the house lately. It's
I think you, me, and John all ate burgers today for lunch.
I got burgers for breakfast. It was like I woke up and I was like, it's burger time.
I woke up and said it's burger time too, but I woke up at noon.
That's the beauty of being an adult. You can just say hamburgers for breakfast, throw a fried egg on it. Oh, man.
I thought about doing that.
Fried egg is OP on a burger.
Just wasn't hungry enough.
You're like, this is just extra work. I gotta get the eggs out. I gotta fry the egg after the burger, put it on.
I just wasn't like, I was only eating lunch when I woke up because I knew we were going for an early dinner. Otherwise, I would have waited till like 2 o'clock and then put that egg on there. Yeah, good 4th of July though.
Yeah, I'm still full. We had like a big dinner in Chinatown, but yeah, I'll go watch some fireworks now. Anyway, that's it. Over Under Podcast. Sub to us on YouTube, Apple Pods, Spotify, all that good stuff. Sub to our Patreon. Check us out. Get your name in the credits. Go join us on Discord if you want to talk movies with us and see what movies we're watching for future episodes because our letterboxd just like auto posts in there. So yeah, good stuff. Anyway, for myself, for Jason, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Over Under Movies podcast. We will see you at the movies. Bye.